Where's the bell? 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 Where's the bell?
By word of mouth, we're gonna bring it to the house.
Where's the bell? Where's the bell? Where's the bell? Where's the bell?
By word of mouth, we're gonna bring it to the house.
Where's the bell? 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 Where's the bell?
By word of mouth, we're gonna bring it to the house.
Where's the bell? Where's the bell? Where's the bell? Where's the bell?
By word of mouth, we're gonna bring it to the house.
Where's the bell? 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 Where's the bell?
Yeah, so some love. CDB, baby.
Where's the bell? Where's the bell?
You guys gotta support out there. Come on.
Where's the bell? Where's the bell?
Hashtag, hashtag.
Where's the bell? Where's the
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Disability Without Poverty's International Day of People with Disabilities event, where we're going to be looking at a year in review of the CDB and Disability Without Poverty. And we kicked it off with the wonderful track from Jay Ross that he wrote for us at the start of the year when we launched our Where's the Bill campaign. So first of all, it's my job to take us through the accessibility needs for this webinar. So welcome to everybody to this webinar. My name is Michelle Hewitt, and I'm the chair of Disability Without Poverty, and I'm one of your hosts for today's events. Before we begin, I'm going to go over the accessibility components and the agenda for the day. Please note that throughout the event, we will have the chat closed to the public as it can be disruptive to other participants. If you experience technical difficulties, you will be able to send a chat message to the hosts and panelists. For all questions that you have, please put them in the Q&A box, usually at the bottom of your screen. We'd greatly encourage you to share your questions, as we'll be responding to as many as we can live during our conversation. Our meeting today features simultaneous English and French translation, LSQ and ASL interpretation, and English and French captioning. Please take a moment to adjust your settings as appropriate. First, select your preferred language, English or French. You do this by selecting the interpretation option on your Zoom menu. Once you select this option, you will not need to change language settings again during the presentation. You must select a language, even if you want to hear this presentation in English. If you're using a mobile device, such as a phone or a tablet, you will find the language interpretation options under More. For those who require ASL or LSQ interpretation, we will be spotlighting those components throughout the presentation. No need to do anything. These will automatically remain on your screen. To enable captions, please select the captions option from your Zoom menu. If you'd like to adjust the size and placement of these captions, you'll need to go into your Zoom accessibility settings. For those of you who would like to access French captions for the event today, please click on the link that's been put in the webinar chat box to access these online. If we can support you throughout this presentation, please send us a chat box and someone will assist you. For any additional settings, please go to your personal Zoom account settings or your in-webinar audio settings for more customization. So, to summarize, our accessibility options, please select your language using the interpretation option, enable captions if required, And finally, make sure to share your questions in the Q&A box. Our team members are on hand to help you with any technical difficulties you may be experiencing. And now, over to my co-host Rabia to take us through our land acknowledgement.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. If you noticed, Michelle said good morning because she's on the West Coast, and I'm saying good afternoon because I'm in Ontario. Welcome. First and foremost, I'd like to recognize our First Nations, Indigenous, and Métis communities. Our ancestors, the original inhabitants of Turtle Island, to whom we are eternally grateful for allowing us the privilege and honor to live on this land. As those that came through colonization to call this land home, we are eternally grateful to everyone who has maintained this beautiful land from sea to sea to sea. And we are committed to truth and reconciliation.
Thank you so much, Rabia. So today, we want to take the time to share our journey, Disability Without Poverty so far, to tell some stories, to talk about what's next, and then we expect to have time for Q&A. And we really hope that you will pass on some questions for us to be able to answer them. Otherwise, Rabia and I will ask each other questions to see where we're going to go with that. So I'm going to pass it over to Rabia now and ask if she can give us a recap as to where it all began in 2020 and 2021.
Well, Michelle, I think we also need to mention, who the heck are we at DWP? I'm DWP's national director, and you are?
I'm the chair. Sorry, I'm not quite with it this morning. It is the morning, and yes, thank you, Rabia. So I'm the chair, and I'm in beautiful Kelowna, BC, with a balmy -5 degrees this morning.
And I am talking to you from Mississauga, Ontario. And as I mentioned, I'm the national director. I am a person with a disability. I'm actually blind. And of course, Michelle, in the spirit of nothing about us without us, also has a disability and has her own accommodation needs. So yes, Michelle, I know it's really early for you on the West Coast, and it's also, a bit of a challenge for you to get fully rolling this early in the morning, related, to the fact that you have limited hours in the day that you can fully participate as you wish.
Yeah, you know me so well. Yes, I'm also disabled. I have fairly advanced multiple sclerosis. You will see me move from side to side if you have vision, because I am in a power wheelchair, and severe fatigue is not my friend, put it that way. So and I'm trying to keep my hands off my face today because I've got a psoriasis flare going on that luckily today I don't quite look as red as I was yesterday, but I'm itchy. So I apologize if you see me dragging my hands away from my face, because I'm a little bit uncomfortable. So anyway, Rabia, back to you.
All right,
please.
thank you.
Tell us.
Thank you. Yes, I will definitely tell our story, the historical context of where all of this began. So this all began during the pandemic. As you know, in the pandemic, people with disabilities, we felt forgotten. We felt abandoned. We felt neglected. We felt ignored through the emergency measures and emergency responses. In fact, any emergency relief directed at us became a political pawn. And then there was the big announcement by the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, in his throne speech of September 2020, the promise of a Canada Disability Benefit. And we looked at that promise and we seized the opportunity. We said, hey, nothing about us without us. And in that spirit, the government has put a promise on the table. We need to seize the opportunity and make sure that this promise is fully realized in the way that people with disabilities, coast to coast to coast, people with disabilities living in poverty, at the risk of ending up in poverty, at Canadians at the risk of acquiring disabilities and experiencing poverty, actually create something that's going to address that genuinely. So we seized the moment with that promise and we started to build some capacity. A number of webinars were held that I was asked to host through Plan and Plan Institute, talking about what a benefit could look like, what movement building looks like, what universal design looks like, what capacity can we build up, and hundreds of people participated in those webinars. Through that was born Disability Without Poverty as a brand at the beginning of 2021. I ended up initially co-chairing with Luca Petruelli. Luca's out there and sends us his best wishes as always, but he has those important performances to do to dazzle people around the world. So Disability Without Poverty leadership table was established, and me as a racialized woman with a disability said, I need to bring more racialized people with disabilities to the table. So we began identifying people who could genuinely reflect the experiences of people with disabilities across this country from various social locations, various regions, and our leadership table took form. We also had a design group of volunteers and consultants that did some design research for us and gave us modeling data, so we were informed about what a benefit could look like. We established a partners table, which has evolved since, with new partners and old partners coming together from various sectors, sharing ideas, energy, and momentum to build this movement. Well, what else happened in 2021? So we started to push for the Canada Disability Benefit. As we gathered this information, we started to talk to the Minister of ESDC responsible for disability inclusion, Carla Qualtrough, our internal champion within government. She was given the mandate in her mandate letter to work on the Canada Disability Benefit as part of her disability inclusion plan and action. So government introduced C-35, and then Parliament was dissolved. Meanwhile, we had already had a roundtable with the Prime Minister. We had done all this design work. We had done an Angus Reid survey in which 89% of Canadians said it's time to end disability poverty. The bill was introduced in its first reading, and Parliament was dissolved. What a disappointment. We were so disappointed. Now, Michelle, you came on board toward that spring and summer. And then, lo and behold, I ended up taking on the role of national director, and you stepped in to chair with Luca. Tell us more. Where does the story go from here?
Yeah, you left me with some really, really big shoes to fill. So since then, you and I have become quite the partnership as we've moved forward with these things. So if I take up this part of the story, here we are, summer 2021, and we have an election in front of us. So we know that us at DWP and the entire disability community has to make sure that our views and our issues are heard. We have consistently asked for the same messages. So we have asked for the Canada Disability Benefit to happen as soon as possible, with no delays, to reduce the high poverty rates for disabled Canadians, to include disabled Canadians in the policy development of the Canada Disability Benefit, and to create a disability poverty line, because we know that being disabled costs more they're not being disabled. So the regular poverty line isn't our poverty line. And one of the major concerns that people had was, and still continue to have, is that we have no clawbacks. So that when we get a benefit and we continue to have all our other benefits, that those two things work together so that people benefit from a benefit and they don't fall behind. So we worked hard through the election and we kept pushing our messages out on social media, talking to the traditional media as many ways as we could to make sure that disability poverty became a high level issue. Once the election was over, and as we all know, it was kind of business as usual, we wanted to get back to this. We'd had the bill on the table and it had gone away. Like, bring it back, let's get moving. So we had an open letter addressed to the Prime Minister and the federal government with close to 200 prominent members of the public signing, including all kinds of politicians, leaders, academics, disabled people from every walk of life, asking to accelerate the Canada Disability Benefit and have this active and authentic participation of people with disabilities from start to finish. We followed that up by a parliamentary e-petition because the outpouring of people that we had when we were putting forward this letter was simply more than we could cope with using the Word document we had. And that really seemed to be true because by the time our parliamentary e-petition was done, we had 17,874 signatures, which led to it being presented in Parliament in February. At the same time, the Senate had 43 members sign an open letter voicing their support. And after this, we started our hashtag Where's the Bill campaign because, as you heard at the start, we needed to know where the bill was because we'd seen it the previous summer. It had been on the table for that little bit of time and then it had gone again. So where's the bill? Through that time, we did as much presenting as we could. I mean, I know that I presented to NEEDS, the National Education Association of Disabled Students, and to, Bachi, one of our really close friends. And I know that at that time we reached out to Cardis, or they reached out to us, I don't quite remember which way, to have a roundtable on disability and employment. Following that, we then had earlier this year, 73 MPs by April signed an open letter asking for the bill to be tabled. And that included like the entire block with one signature. The block was there. And soon that went to over 100. And that was the parliamentary e-petition was authorised by our very good friend, Mike Morris, a Green MP for Kitchener Centre. And he was the person that organised the open letter for the MPs to sign. We then went on had a webinar with myself and Brent Page, with a conversation on disability, the Canada Disability Benefit, and by this point, Rabia is working, with the perspectives of diverse communities at Memorial University, so that we're really reaching out, hopefully, to that C2C2C, as Rabia was mentioning. And when we got to May, all of a sudden, the NDP, Benita Zarrillo, another very good friend of the disability community, puts forth a unanimous consent motion to immediately table the bill. And finally, by June, a whole year later, what was Bill C-35 now became what we all know, it's Bill C-22, the bill to implement a Canada Disability Benefit. It was finally tabled, and so a whole different angle of work began for us. Rabia, do you want to take us through some of that?
Yes, and as we say at Disability Without Poverty, we've been building a plane and flying it at the same time. We have been going with the political wave and wind in whichever direction they so choose. The timing of our work has been at the mercy of our political system and our democratic institutions, and we have been so agile and adaptive to that reality, pushing hard, never giving up an opportunity to make sure that we are present, we are heard, and we are bringing as many voices along as we can. So C22 was tabled on June the 2nd. And what incredible timing. Like, we really are very intuitive into the political process. We had our basics of a bill webinar lined up to happen just a week after that with Senator Brent Cotter, who is an independent senator from Saskatchewan, who now is going to be the sponsor of C22 once it goes to Senate after third reading, and Greg McMeekin, the Alberta advocate on disability, both talking about how a bill becomes law in this country. What's that process? You know, our Where's the Bill campaign took a whole new form of being better informed about where is this bill now. So Bill 22, first reading in the House, happens in June. Our webinar happens, and we continue engaging. Michelle presents as a witness to the Finance Committee. We're constantly seeking opportunities and intruding on opportunities to present disability, poverty, and the financial hardship that people with disabilities are facing in this country, whether it's talking to finance, whether it's talking to provincial governments, whether it's talking to media. So Michelle makes, does this formal witness thing to finance and continues engaging with finance on a regular basis throughout 2022, educating them on the needs of people with disabilities and how such benefits need to interface and truly lift up people with disabilities to thrive in a reasonable and meaningful way in this country of abundance. So I end up making a presentation at the, one of our great partners, Community Food Centers of Canada. I make a presentation at their food national symposium, again, talking about disability, poverty, and mobilizing people in the conversation. And many, many food centers, especially the one out toward Stratford or Strathroy, end up actively engaging with their local officials around the Canada Disability Benefit Bill and impressing upon them the importance of it. Disability Without Poverty in Alberta holds the National Disability Unity Dance Party. There's a wonderful group out there of people with disabilities, and particularly developmental disabilities, who are artists and performers. And there are all kinds of wonderful partnerships that have evolved for us in Alberta, and that national party is online on Zoom, just getting people moving and thinking and talking about the Canada Disability Benefit Bill. So September comes around, and we need to talk more about the design of the benefit. So the basics of a benefit with our friend and wise woman, Professor Jennifer Robson, happens. Meanwhile, I visit Ottawa for some informal conversations with people and come back inspired, saying, hey, we need to go to Ottawa to push for this bill to be tabled for second reading and expedited. We want C22 to be passed in 2022. So,
and I have to say, Rabia,
Yep.
you said to me, so we need to go to Ottawa. And here we were in, was it August, September? And I was like, really? Like next year sometime we should go to Ottawa? No, we're going in 6 weeks. Okay, so things, really take on quite a different, once we decide we're going to Ottawa.
Absolutely. And you know, people would think like we're really out to lunch. What are we doing? You can't pull off 3 days of action on the Hill within 4 weeks of planning. But hey, we did it. Thanks to a wonderful partnership with Maple Leaf Foods Foundation, you know, support of Imagine Canada, Community Food Centers Canada, our friends and partners, United Way Sans Trade Canada, our trade unions like the Canadian Labour Congress and United Food and Commercial Workers of Canada. Everybody steps up and loves the idea. And there we are, centering disability poverty in the poverty conversation on October 17, the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. We spotlight disability poverty in Canada. Wow, and what an experience.
And you know, Rabia, when we started planning, we thought that when we got to Ottawa, we were going to be advocating to push for second reading to happen. That's what our initial planning was about, that we didn't think second reading of the bill, which is the place that we were at then, was actually going to happen. But instead, so therefore, I'm just gonna put that we got a little bit of a shock though when we got to September 20th.
Yes, Ottawa heard we were coming to town, and you know, they probably freaked out thinking, oh my God, all these disabled people are going to converge on the Hill. We better run with this bill. So they decided to unanimously pass the bill when we were there. They tabled it for second reading on September the 20th. And when we were there on October 18, we were there, in fact, to witness them unanimously pass the bill. So that was quite a high. We met with dozens of MPs and senators and ministers and held a fabulous reception on the Hill with all party critics and the minister represented. And then we celebrated and demonstrated and showed unity on the Hill on October the 19th, when we rallied to pass C-22 in 2022. So where are we now? Well, you know, we testified at the HUMA committee. So the bill passed second reading and got sent off to a committee that reviews these types of bills. We had already met with many of the members of that committee. We testified before HUMA. HUMA has closed its hearings and has received amendments. Some of those amendments were debated last night and passed. They will be meeting again to continue the conversation on Monday. We are still very hopeful that third reading can be the holiday wish that we have, the holiday present that we want to ensure this time of the year. We were hoping that the bill would be fast-tracked, but unfortunately, politics does its own timetable. We've pushed as much as we can, and there's always diversity of opinion. So some of that diversity of opinion has triggered more conversation and debate. Generally, people with disabilities, we stand united in making sure that this bill is fast-tracked and that people with disabilities receive the benefit that they desperately need. It is a national emergency. People with disabilities living in poverty shouldn't be the case. People shouldn't be choosing medical assistance and dying because they cannot afford to live. Lawmakers have a duty to do right by people with disabilities. The forgotten few across this country, the 1.4 million to 1.6 million people with disabilities who have been left behind further and further, deeper and deeper in poverty as we continue to experience this pandemic, as a recession sets in, as inflation keeps inflating food prices. People with disabilities are worse off than they ever were before. We do feel there's a light at the end of the tunnel, as long as we stand united and keep marching on to demand the Canada Disability Benefit. So Michelle, I'm rambling on and I missed a couple of things. You know how passionate
I'll
I am
catch them
about
up.
this.
Yeah.
But we
Don't you
did
worry.
have also, we met in Montreal to engage our friends in Quebec. We held French only conversations twice in Montreal to make sure that people are up to date and fully engaged in a fully accessible way. And here we are today, continuing to meet with politicians, continuing to meet with senators, impressing upon them how important it is to get the Canada Disability Benefit out there.
Sure. So yeah, Rabia, I have a list of, we both have a list that we're kind of picking things off, and you know, anything that we don't cover is just because of the flow of our conversation. I think it's really important
Michelle,
though that we go on.
Yep. Sorry, last week. I forgot about last week. Oh my God. See, so
Last
much has
week,
happened.
there you go.
So much has happened. Last week, I had the pleasure of hanging around Ottawa again with friends and allies, and attended the minister's reception, and you know, heard the political commitment and the will again from the Prime Minister and the Minister and the Senator sponsor about getting the Canada Disability Benefit out to people with disabilities. I met with senators from other parties, and I met with other politicians, and of course, our friends and allies of within organizations nationally, impressing upon everyone how important it is for us to continue this conversation and keep pushing hard. So, wow, it's been a whirlwind of activity in 2022 for me and all of us at DWP.
Yes, it has, and all of you out there as well. You know, as I mentioned, we had almost 18,000 signatures on the petition, and going back to that day in September when the bill started second reading, we launched a Twitter storm, and we had 8,000 tweets with the hashtag CDB by 23, and we were trending at number 6 for part of the day. Now, when I say us, I mean all of us, all of us out there. So I know that a lot of you already get our newsletters and read it, and I really appreciate all the time that people take to write into us. We want you to know that, you know, without your active participation, that the Canada Disability Benefit would not be where it is today, and that your voices matter so much. We do read every single thing that you send in to us, and you know, even if we don't reply to you immediately, or if we may not get it at all, we certainly mention, you know, your views and thoughts in all meetings that we have, and we take that with us. So please stay involved, stay following us on social media, and getting our newsletter and those sorts of things. Rabia, do you want to just talk about you know, where you think we might be going next very quickly?
Well, you know, in our hearts, our souls, we believed in getting this bill passed into law this year. We know now that that's not going to happen because there's a break looming upon us, and the government will resume at the end of January. Senate will be called back at the end of January. We're hoping that if we continue, you know, engaging on social media, writing to our MPs, calling our MPs' offices, you know, emailing the Prime Minister, even just communicate with politicians in Ottawa, saying, get the job done, get this bill into law in 2023 as early as possible. But now let's pass third reading. We needed to pass third reading before the holidays so that it's the first order of business when the Senate resumes. And then we need to impress upon the Senate. We will be continuing our conversation, and we will continue to write to them and educate them and inform them to expedite the Senate process so that the bill can take royal assent and become law. And then it's pushing for the benefit to be budgeted. We're pushing for co-creation with bureaucrats in order to ensure that regulations are quickly developed and developed in a way that they best meet the needs of people with disabilities, that the voices and needs of people with disabilities are genuinely reflected as equal partners in the design of the benefit. Ottawa needs to learn to do things differently, and we are ready to work with them to make a difference, to build forward better, as I like to say. We're not building back better. We want to build forward better. So again, we want to push for the benefit to be designed and delivered to people with disabilities as quickly as possible. So we have to see it in the budget in 2023. This may not happen in the spring budget, but we want it to happen as soon as possible in the fall economic statement, in the throne speech of next fall. It'll be long enough since the promise was made. September 2023 will be 3 years since we were promised the Canada Disability Benefit. People with disabilities need to see it in the budget in 2023 and delivered to them as quickly as possible. So we will be launching a campaign to impress upon the finance minister and others the urgency, the national emergency that we see disability poverty as. We don't want disabled people standing in the cold asking for a meal. We don't want disabled people being forced to take on the charity model and raising funds for their basic necessities online. We don't want to see another disabled life lost to MAID because they couldn't afford to live. So it's really, really fundamental that we get all people with disabilities, all 22% of us across this country, and everybody that cares about us, that loves us, that is an ally to us, talking with one voice, with one message, impressing upon lawmakers to do right by disabled people. It's nothing about us without us, and the time is now, because we're in a state of a minority government and things can change very quickly. If we miss out on this opportunity, I'm afraid there's no coming back, Michelle. Over to you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Rabia. It's incredible that we have got this far in this fall session, right? And I think, like you, I have great hopes that we can kind of push it over that final line in the House before the House breaks for the holidays, and then over to the Senate and out of the Senate as soon as possible. We have learned so much through this, and I know that the amount of time that it takes for things to move from becoming a piece of legislation to actually being enacted, the timelines are things that kind of horrify me. How long it takes to will take to get the money in people's hands, but we will continue to push for that to be within 2023. There cannot be another winter with disabled people living in the levels of poverty they're living in. We're going to move to answer some questions really soon. And before we do that, though, it's really important for us that we thank the people that have helped us at DWP get this far. We made the decision early on that that we weren't going to apply for, accept any money from government. And so that's meant that we've had support from major people, major foundations rather, to do that. So our thanks to McConnell and to Maitri and to community foundations, including Toronto, Hamilton, Vancouver, and Calgary, to the United Way, to the Canadian Labour Congress, I'm sorry, I'm slipping over these words, to United Food and Commercial Workers of Canada. Alongside that, as Rabia mentioned, we have a partners table of other organisations that help us to shape the work that we're going to do and help to bring us all together so that our organisations can work on campaigns together that, gets us to all kinds of audiences and populations within the disability community. So our thanks go to March of Dimes Canada, to L'Arche Canada, to the Community Food Centres Canada, Maple Leaf Foods, Batchy, Plan and Plan Institute. Thanks to people who have helped us, like Rethink and Tom Shapansky. If you've seen some creative advertising recently, that may be from those people. And to Ashoka.
Michelle, including, we've been really innovative. We have billboards up in major cities. We have public service announcements across radio platforms talking about the fact that the one minority group that every Canadian can potentially join is that of a disability. So 100% of people can have a disability, and we need to figure that out as caring and a caring society.
Yeah, I think, Rabia, that's so important, that this isn't a currently disabled people's issue. This is a whole of Canada issue, and those billboard messages and radio ads have really helped with that. Along the way, there's been some special advisors, and I give my personal thanks to what I call my three wise women: Jen Robson, Lindsay Tedds, and Molly Harrington. Because whenever I have a question that I'm really, is this it actually how it happens in government? Would this be a really daft idea to say this? Those are the people I go to for excellent advice. To Donna Thompson, who's always there to listen and to support. To our leadership table, too many of you to right now. I hope you're on the call and that you may send some points in. Our DWP staff who have turned on a dime to make things happen, because one day the wind's blowing this way and the next day it's like, drop that, we're going to go this way instead. And and without them, and without some pretty special people behind us, to the tech staff that have been here for all our webinars, and without you guys, the people that you see on the screens doing ASL and LSQ, but behind them as well, there's a whole team of people that make us look a lot smoother than we actually are. So thanks to you. And there's so many of you out there that have chosen to amplify the voices of other people, whether it's on social media, whether it's in conversations with friends and families. We really thank you. So I'm going to move on because we've only got 20 minutes left. And we have had a number of questions come in. And the first one I want to go to is one that I feel really keenly. Do we feel MAID has accelerated the bill's progress? So, I have a friend who is eligible for MAID right now. And, I spoke to Ahmad, which I don't remember what all the initials are, but that's the Joint House and Senate Committee. And those hearings have just wrapped up. And I'm such a minor voice in this conversation. But our voice was to say, you know what, there are people right now who are accessing MAID, not because of health-related reasons, but because of poverty. Mm-hmm. People who live in toxic housing. That's no country that we can be proud of. People who can't get enough care, people who are just giving up, that they don't want to live that life anymore. And it's not because there's no medical solution to or remedy, to use the terms of the bill. So it feels so hugely ironic to say that we, at one hand, we have this bill moving forward to lift disabled people out of poverty. And at the same time, we have some of the most lax assistance in dying legislation in the world. So I know that a number of us, and I felt this really keenly, that it's such an emotive issue. And to the person who asked the question, do I feel MAID has accelerated the bill's progress? I don't think it has, but the stories that are now coming out, the fact that we can say, look, we're trying to lift people out of poverty, and now the number of stories that are coming out from veterans, disabled veterans who, I think if anybody saw the news, the Paralympian who was asking for a wheelchair lift, and the response was, sorry, it's taken so much time. How about MAID? Just no country that we can feel proud of. Rabia, do you want to say more to that, or do you want me to throw you another question?
No, throw another question.
So, okay then. Somebody's asking, are people with disability involved in the design of it? Are we at the table? And it says, is anyone from DWP on DAC? I think they mean MDAG, Ministers' Disability Advisory Group or Committee. And that seems the perfect question for you.
Yes, I am on the Ministers' Disability Advisory Group. There will be, which will be evolving into an advisory council of sorts going forward. And I am currently a part of it and will continue to be as long as I can, in order to make sure that I'm in the know and can impress upon the urgency of the need for the Canada Disability Benefit. We have been talking to senior bureaucrats. We have already been educating and informing them on our core principles, and we will continue having those conversations informally and formally, however possible. And we are pushing for that co-creation. So we want to be a part of the design and delivery implementation of the benefit as regulations are formed.
So the next question, and I've literally just pulled it up on my phone to make sure that I don't get it incorrect. Were any amendments made, and if so, were they? So our very good friends at Inclusion Canada live tweeted yesterday, and so if you're on Twitter, you can find things there. If you go to the website of HUMA, Google HUMA, HUMA in capital letters committee, it will take you to that part of the government's website, and then you can actually click on yesterday's meeting and you can listen to it through. If you wait a week or so, I would imagine that they post their minutes, and so you'll be able to read it, and their videos are captioned as well. So, but yesterday, you know, that there were a number of amendments that there was one that was to add the definition of disability from the Accessible Canada Act. I'm sorry if I missed them all. There was another one to require the benefit to be indexed to inflation, which is so hugely important. You know,
and adequacy, Michelle, and adequacy was added.
Yes, and adequacy. I guess one of the disappointments, there was an amendment withdrawn that would have related to individualization. This is such technical language. So the amendment and NDP3 passed unanimously to ensure regulations, which is what comes after the bill becomes law, take into consideration the official poverty line and protect an adequate amount for the CDB. So that's really important, right?
Now here's the risk, though. These amendments have been approved by this particular committee. It remains to be seen how the vote happens once they're complete. The committee completes its work and takes it back to the House for third reading, with the additional amendments. Then there will be a vote. We would like to see the spirit of unanimity continue, but we can't be sure.
So, which rolls us on to a next question: how much longer will HUMA take? Well, they paused yesterday to decide to have another meeting to continue to do their clause by clause review and to consider other amendments. So at least one more meeting,
which is Monday.
And after that, you know, it's a report's written, and we hope third reading. But you know, it's the 8th of December, and they break on. Is it the 22nd, Rabia? They do seem to go later than I think. Somebody asked what happens after third reading. Well, as Rabia just said, third reading itself is fairly, it's important, because it's not a done deal. Just because Huma said this is what it should be doesn't mean to say that once it gets to the House, everybody is going to vote yes. We really, if there's politicians listening right now, if you can tell your MPs something, once it gets to third reading, this is playing with the lives of disabled people for the theatre of politics. This is not the time or place. Third reading, please vote. So then we would, once it passes third reading, the next question is, will the bill back to the Senate be part of the process? And yes, that's what happens next. As Rabia mentioned previously, Senator Brent Cotter of Saskatchewan, he is the person that is the leader of the bill, the presenter of it. I apologize, my terminology is not necessarily the correct ones, but he is the person that will present this bill to the Senate. And basically it goes through the same stages: first reading, second reading, their committee, third reading. And at that point, we hope that we have royal assent. And at that point, we rush it off to regulations and we tell people to start working on that, which is the place where we want the voices of disabled people to be at that table to co-create all of the details that we are so looking for. I'm looking down at some of the questions, and a lot of the questions here are to do with all of those details. And the questions that I read about, how about the amount and eligibility and all of those things, those are all the answers that we want to. The decision was taken by the government to present this as what they call a framework bill, because they said that by doing that, regulations was the place where we will hear the voices of disabled people, and regulations is where all of those details will be worked out. That is why it is so important that we get to this point, and we now say that it must be in the I'm sorry, I was just reading somebody, I just have to pull this up very quickly. Yes, that's what I said. After third reading, it's not royal assent. It does exactly, to the people from New Brunswick's People with Disability Committee. Yes, that's what I said. It goes to the Senate and it does everything again before it gets royal assent. So it does first, second, committee, third in the House, first, second, committee, third in the Senate, and then it gets royal assent. Then it's actually a law, and then the work begins on all the details. So all of the questions, and this then brings into the provincial territorial piece. Somebody's asking, how will they be safe from clawbacks, and how will consultation with provincial governments be done? We would love to know, right? That's this next piece. We will continue to press, and that is the part where you need to press your provincial politicians, your MLAs if you live out here, or MPPs and the rest of the government and so on. That is where you have to press them to say, you know what, we cannot come out of this better off, and we cannot just lose financial support, but we cannot lose those goods and services and programs that we rely on as disabled people. Removing a bus pass is the same as removing cash from somebody.
Yeah, and Michelle, if I just jump in here right now.
Yes, I was good.
Yeah, just to add that, we do have a province by province strategy. We know that some provinces will definitely jump on clawing back. Benefits across the country vary. This is why we are organizing province by province, and we want everyone's involvement. People, we need to hear your stories, and you need to tell your stories. You need to tell your stories in writing. You need to tell your stories publicly. You need to talk to media. You need to blog and vlog and put out the word, convince people that disability poverty is enough now and that this benefit is coming, and we want no politicking with it. We want no grubby little greedy hands wanting to save money on the backs of disabled people. Enough is enough. It is our time, because we're building forward better. We're doing things differently. We're not going to leave people with disabilities behind anymore coming out of this pandemic. So the Canada
Rabia,
benefit. Yep.
Rabia, let me throw you this question. Why would we want a flawed bill to be rushed through Parliament instead of having a bill with all the necessary safeguards, which may take a little longer, but which will, in the end, lead to much better regulations?
Well, is there time to wait for somebody who's signed on to MAID and is taking their last breath? Is there time to wait when somebody cannot feed their child, when somebody cannot feed themselves, when somebody cannot buy the medication they need to mitigate their pain on a daily basis? Is there time to wait when we have a minority government which can fall at any time? Let's not forget how our democracy works. When we have minority governments, time is of the essence to do the right thing. We have a bill on the table. If it isn't law, it's over, and no government will bring it back. I'm sorry to say, it's not going to happen for another decade or two or our lifetime. We have an opportunity. It's on the table. I am not a diehard any party person. I am an issues person. I will work with anybody who will push our needs forward front and center. We have that opportunity now. If we wait for perfect, we will wait forever.
And I think it's really important to think about what happens when things get put into legislation. If they're in legislation, it takes legislation to change them. So coming out of the pandemic, there were various pieces of there were various things that needed to be done to support people, like through the Canada Child Benefit and so on, and they couldn't be done until it was brought back to Parliament and passed again. So having all the details in legislation may sound very reassuring, because it's, as to use the language of this question, like necessary safeguards and so on, but it could take 10, 15, 20 years to get to that point if every piece goes through government. And if for something happens and changes, like a pandemic, like we've just been through, and we've got everything buttoned down, it means that we have to go back through legislation to change it. I understand that regulations and leaving it up to, it sounds scary. It sounds like the bogeyman under the bed that we go looking for as children at night. It really does, because it makes it feel like that anything could happen. So I really want to say to you that I hear you. I hear that pain, right? And I hear that worry. But I'm also concerned that we simply can't wait. And it might not be just a little longer. As Rabia said, it may be never. This is our opportunity. We are coming to the end. That time has gone incredibly quickly. So we are coming to the end of our time today. I would just like to say to everybody, thank you for being here. Please, can you, if you want to take one action from today, contact your MP. Tell them about your story. Tell them about the people in your community, and tell them that this Canada Disability Benefit needs to make its way into law.
And
equally,
we have to work with trust. There's a lot of trust and faith that we have, that we can get people to do the right thing when they know the reality, and when we appeal to their sense of values and humanity. So that's what we're doing, and that's what we got to continue to do with your help, with your stories, with your passion to tell the people in power what the reality is that they're removed from.
If you go on that Humour website, you will see briefs that people have submitted and the individual stories that people have told, not in fancy words, that not in, you know, following some type of you know, pre-set out brief as those of us who do it from organizations. People are just telling their stories. Those stories matter. Please tell your stories to your MP, right? Please tell those individual stories, and then tell them to your MLAs or your provincial politicians of whatever titles that they have, and your municipal ones as well. All of that matters. All of
and media.
You know,
and media, talk to people that you know in the media, get them to write and to talk about it in their in wherever they can give voice to the issues. This is an opportunity that we have through the Canada Disability to transform social safety net in this country, our social safety net. This is a transformative solution. We have something for seniors. We have something for children. It's our time. It's the time for people with disabilities.
Rabia and I get very passionate about this, as you can probably tell. And our passion spills into everything we do, whether it's talking to you right now or whether it's talking to politicians. We give them the same message. Thank you for being here. Please stay connected to us. I will read out, you know, on the screen, it says our website, disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca. You can email us directly at hello@disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca. We're on Twitter and Facebook, and you can search for us there. Thank you so much for everything that you have done to support us and to bring your stories to us. And we hope that together we can continue to push this through in 2023.
Thank you, merci, and magwitch.